Yo, welcome. Welcome to Coffee, Candles, and Conversation. My name is Duro Vian, and today is the introductory podcast to what's going to be one of the world's greatest podcasts. Now, Coffee, Candles, and Conversation is going to be the name of this podcast, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I know that the goal was to be able to drop the first podcast earlier of the month of July, and we just weren't able to do it. To be honest with you, I think that for me, it took some time to be able to feel comfortable with releasing podcasts. I think there's times where I can get into the funk of being a perfectionist, and I feel like unless it's perfect, I'm not willing to release it, which I'm starting to realize, or I've realized this some time ago, but this is a critical error when it comes to growth, especially creativity. But before we get into all of that stuff, I just want to go ahead and give you guys a little bit about why I decided to start a podcast, the things that you guys can look forward to, and some of the things that we plan to do this season of Coffee, Candles, and Conversation. So why did I decide to create a podcast? The reason why I decided to get into podcasting started from when I was about 5 years old. 5 has always been the age for me, where I felt like that's when I came into realization of a lot of things. But when I was 5, I started to notice that I had this natural love for words. And little did I know words would be something that would follow me for the rest of my life. But it came through my mother writing music and watching her use words in a way that is able to influence people or make them dance or make them feel an emotion. And that always fascinated me. So I said that I wanted to do something like that as I got older. So I would write as well. But somewhere down the line, I started to read books. And when I started to read books, my mind started to open up to all these different possibilities, and all these different thoughts and philosophies and the ways that people were live, or will live in the near future. And it was hard for me to sit and write, and so it was easier for me to just say and do. And so that right there prompted me to become someone who focused on the art of speaking. Along the way, I had people who would tell me, hey, I think that you are a really great speaker. You should try podcasting. And podcasting has been a field that I was interested in since day one, because when it comes to podcasts, I've always been interested in the things that Joe Rogan speaks about. And I wanted to emulate him, because when it comes to the podcasting world, that's the GOAT. And I wanted to be like Joe Rogan. And so it's always been something that I talked about. And this year, my wife decided to go ahead and give me a microphone. And I said, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and start this podcasting thing. And here we are. What has taken me so long to curate a podcast, though, is, as I mentioned earlier, is being a perfectionist. I think that I've always struggled with trying to do things perfect. And so sometimes I prevent myself from progressing as much as I should because of needing to be perfect, which I'm realizing that perfectionism is a critical error to growth. Again, before I dive into that rabbit hole, I will say this. One of the things that you guys can look forward to when it comes to this podcast is a diverse group of guests. I plan to bring a lot of people on. I plan on speaking about a lot of different subjects, from religion to philosophy to technology to martial arts, to leadership, to business, to structures, systems, routines. All of these different things I plan to dive into. One of my biggest goals for podcasting and speaking is to dive in to subjects that I'm not also familiar with, but yet have this opportunity to learn from people who are so much more brighter and more thoughtful than I am in particular subjects. And my whole goal in life is not to be right, but to acquire understanding. I think that the more that a human being spend time trying to understand the next person, the more we draw closer together in life. And so my goal is to do just that with this podcast. Is not to be a teacher, but to be an understanding individual, to be a complete person. And I think in order for me to do that, I have to be willing to ask the right questions. I have to be willing to be challenged. I have to be willing to challenge, and to be able to come into common grounds. And so we're going to be having a lot of that. I can't wait to be able to bring some of my friends on, and we can talk about all sorts of things, and just being able to watch just great moments unveil as we're going through this process. But this is certainly something that I can't wait to do. It's something that I've been looking forward to. It's something that I've been itching to do. And I said, hey, today is the day that we get it going. So this is the introductory podcast. It's not going to be too long, but you should see other episodes come after this. One thing I will say, though, is we're talking about perfectionism, and I'm going to end with this. I read a quote by this guy named Josh Wakins. He has a book called... What is the book called? Oh, man. He has a book called The Art of Learning. And in the book, he talks about that there's a difference between performing and growing, right? And the reason why he speaks about this is because he's trying to get people to understand that when it comes to martial arts, there's specific goals that needs to be met. So if the goal is to win a match, then go all out. If the goal is to grow, you have to be willing to invest in your loss. The reason why he speaks about this is because no human being can grow without being willing to try things. And when you try things, there's opportunity and gaps in which failure is an option. I'm learning now that if I want to be a complete human, and I want to be someone that is lived to its full potential, I have to be willing to invest in my loss. Loss never feels good. Failure never feels good. But the more you're willing to do it, and the more that you're willing to invest in your loss, the easier it is to try things out. You don't want to be somebody who is one-dimensional. You want to be somebody who's able to cover all ends. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to lose. That is the reason why we go to practice. We go to practice to practice. No one is expecting someone to be perfect. It's not about perfectionism. It's about effort in attempting to do things, even when it's behind your scope. Because one thing I really have a hard time with is the word talent. I used to think that people were talented. And sure, some people are. But to me, talent means nothing. Because even the most talented individual has to wake up and compete. And the thing is, when you're going against somebody who works hard, it's ingrained in them. When it gets difficult, they trained for the difficulty. When you're talented, once you reach a certain threshold, once it gets too difficult, you quit. But when you've trained for the difficult moments, when the difficult moments arise, you will arrive. And so I think that no more will I allow perfectionism to dictate my future. No more Am I willing to stop and not progress because I'm afraid of failure? I care about what people may think. My goal is not to be perfect. My goal is to progress. And through progression, I'm going to fail. I'm not going to always say the right things. I'm not going to always do the right things. But if I'm willing to get back up plenty of times, I'll be okay. And you will be okay. And so look, man, I don't want to be long-winded, but I'm glad that we're finally on the road. Coffee, candles, and conversation. It's on the map. Let's do it. See you guys soon. God bless.